Welcome to Ricky Motivational Bobby's Beach Reads number 1 on Opposite Day Astrology, Radical Ecopsychology, and the Friendly Aquarius Full Moon. Ricky Bobby just returned home from his first vacation. We flew to North Carolina and spent a week with our oldest and our youngest friends. Ricky's plane ticket cost as much as mine and was my birthday present to me. Ricky immediately befriended my best friend's 4-year-old son, Ketch. At first, Ricky was a little terrified at the intensity of Ketch's affection. But later, when Ketch caught a cold that turned into a nasty ear infection that led to hours of wailing, Ricky revealed his true feelings. He snuggled up to Ketch, kissing his ears and his cheeks, sleeping at his feet. Ricky was worried about his friend and wanted to help the only way he knows how, which is love, love, love. Earlier that day, Ricky had befriended 2 yellow labs on the beach and quickly moved from friendship to some light wrestling with Tank, whose owners thought he would be a much bigger dog. A few days later, Ricky and I attempted to travel home and had one of those horrific airport experiences where everything that could go wrong does go wrong, and a quick and easeful 5-hour trip becomes a 12-hour nightmare. For the most part, Ricky slept on my lap the entire time while I watched docudramas on HBO, with his head resting on my hand and 12 soft, curly pounds pooled in my lap. The only time he reacted was when an unnecessarily strict, at least in my opinion, stewardess forced me to put his kennel on the floor while the plane was taking off, and of course, all that motion and noise and lack of control scared him, when all he needed was to sit on my lap and make some eye contact. Okay, but what about opposite day astrology and the friendly Aquarius full moon? Havanese are born to be friendly. Literally, their entire genetic purpose is to pick a person and become their best friend, aka shadow. Havanese were bred as a companion dog for the Spanish aristocracy in Cuba in the 1800s and have earned the nickname Velcro dog because they stick so closely to their companion's side. Like the full Aquarius moon, Havanese want to invite everyone to the party, to make everyone feel at home. They are friendly with children and the elderly and with strangers and don't tolerate being alone. This jovial breed loves attention, adores company, and has so much love to give. They will give it back to you tenfold. Like the full moon in Aquarius, Ricky just wants to give his gift of friendship to the community. Like the full moon in Aquarius, Ricky is sensitive to group energies. He picks up on how the people around him are feeling. He vibes with and responds to a sympathetic nervous system on high alert. My heart is always breaking because Ricky's heart is so open, and lately mine feels so closed. Lately, it feels like I am always having opposite day astrology. The rest of the world is calling in new groups and opening up to new friendships and communicating gratitude, while I am retreating inward to loneliness and depression, all my tender parts closing because there are so many sharp edges in my home life. It feels like the whole world is lighting up with all that yummy Leo energy. Everyone around me is in their fullest expression, and I am at my lowest vibration. What do you do with opposite day astrology? Is this a syndrome other people experience? When I try Googling opposite astrology, I get a lot of answers about what to do when you have the worst horoscope in the world. This is not quite my problem. Mine is a feeling of being out of sync or experiencing an alternate reality. Has this happened to you? Has the full or new moon made promises that never manifested in your life? When the most you can do is ground yourself back in felt reality? Which brings me to radishes and radical ecopsychology. Radish and radical have the same root, which is root. So to be radical is to get at the root of something. Radical ecopsychologist Andy Fisher argues that, quote, daily existence with our economized and technologized reality has been described by some as a process of low-grade chronic traumatization. I have wondered at the absurdity of lining up the wounded at the psychotherapist's office and of researching the minutiae of the therapeutic process, while the everyday social forces that violate our nature and guarantee a steady supply of crippled souls go, for the most part, unquestioned. And while these same general forces continue to go about their business of tearing down the biosphere. In a critical sense, then, Ecopsychology is, for me, an effort to understand the social links between these two areas of violence, between the violation we recognize as the ecological crisis and the violation we recognize in human suffering. Andy talks about how we carry the pervasive mistreatment of nature, both human and non-human, in our bodies. He advocates for deer tracks, sunshine on tree trunks, and heartfelt hugs alongside critical analysis. This way, people can live ecologically radical lives in whatever ways make sense from within the context of their own life experience and interests. The fateful question of our time is, thus, whether or not we will choose to find collective ways to bear our pain and suffering, to strengthen ourselves, so that we can then stop negating life and instead get back to it. This is Opposite Day Astrology for the friendly full moon in Aquarius. How can we live ecologically radical lives? How can we choose to find collective ways to bear our pain and suffering? How can we stop negating life and instead get back to it? Joanna Macy argues that unless you have some roots in a spiritual practice that holds life sacred and encourages joyful communion with all your fellow beings, facing the enormous challenges ahead becomes nearly impossible. The challenges I am facing right now are simultaneously too enormous and not enormous enough. The sun is shining everywhere in South Florida. The sun never stops shining in South Florida. There are Vape Pen Jesuses at every 7-Eleven. It smells like God is cooking chicken soup in the sky, and the air is full of money. And you are texting with a poet friend about WWVPJ, Woo Woo Vape Pen Jesus, who is totally the deity of opposite day astrology, friendly full moon in Aquarius. That and facilitating the so-called inner work of social change.